the night my dad died. On the last kind of cognizant things that he did with me is we'd stay up all night. I think he was in a lot of pain, and he'd say, let's pray the Lord's Prayer. Let's say the Apostles' Creed. Read me some Psalms. Writing the book made me realize he wasn't asking to do those things just to pass the time. I think there's actually stories inside of our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. There's a story there, our Father. What does that mean? And as he was having them being recited, he was actually living and embodying them, which he had been doing his whole life, but at the end of his life, I think he wanted to go there. You're not saved by a good distillation and presentation of the gospel. You're saved by the gospel. Grief is okay going forward because the absence of what I miss is okay to kind of go back into. The wound's still there. I can actually hold on to that and realize that the loss reminds me of what I miss and what I'm going to see again one day.
Hey there, and welcome to the Upside Down People podcast. I'm your host, Caleb, and I'm so glad that you've joined with us here today. If this is your first time joining, this is a podcast where we have gospel-centered conversations with people who love Jesus and basically explore and hear some stories on how Christians engage within this current cultural moment. If you haven't already, please be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I'll be so grateful if you're able to leave us a rating and review as well. With that said, I'm so excited for you guys to hear this conversation, so let's get into it together. Well, welcome to the Upside Down People podcast, Michael Keller. So glad to be having a conversation with you here. Evening on my side, early morning on your side, in the busy city of New York. How are you going?
Good. Somewhere between the both of us, we're awake.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I feel like we're on we're literally opposite sides of the world, but just by nature of cities. So I'm in Perth, Western Australia, and Perth is like a glorified country town, where New York is, I believe, completely opposite, very busy, on the move all the time.
There's Broadway right over there.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that people can see that, but just a little bit different than Perth, I bet.
Yeah, exactly. Well, while we were chatting before the conversation, I heard sirens going, and I was like, yeah, you must be in the thick of it. You're
going to hear that on and off, just because Broadway is a loud street. Broadway was the original cattle path out of, back when Wall Street was actually a wall. The cattle path up to the, pastures was up here. So
wow.
That's our main thoroughfare. It's the one street that they allowed to crisscross the grid of what is known as Manhattan. So,
there you go. Yeah, great. Well, you're a pastor at Redeemer Lincoln Square. For our listeners who may not be familiar with Redeemer or may not be familiar with yourself, maybe you can add some flesh to both of those and to yourself in what you do, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Redeemer Lincoln Square, we started 8 years ago. We were a plant out of the original Redeemer that actually was started in 1989 by my father, Tim Keller. He started it, and then in 2017, we were planted out of that group. There's now 6 Redeemers all across Manhattan and Brooklyn, and still growing, still going. And we, obviously over the decades it's changed some, but generally we have a lot of young professionals. 75% of our church is under the age of 45. Wow. Which I tell people, well, if you're over the age of 45, don't worry. 1 in 4 people are just like you. And I don't know if that helps them as much, but a lot of folks that are either here for work or maybe grew up here, but have moved into more of sort of, I guess, Redeemer Lincoln Square. Lincoln Square is near the Art Center, where there's a lot of opera, dance, ballet, things like that, of that nature.
Right.
So, yeah.
Does that change the culture of the church?
Well, sure. Whoever comes to your church, you are. The minute you do worship in any kind of style or voice or even language. You're letting some people kind of understand the gospel and other people not. So if I started speaking in Spanish, there'd be a lot of people who would stop coming to my church and a lot of people who'd start coming to my church. If I started speaking and using a different set of illustrations and metaphors, I think there would be some people who would come in more so and some less. I think that this is all the concept of contextualization, that how you present the gospel. Naturally, some people will gravitate towards some presentations more over other ones.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another question that I have around that. So your father started Redeemer many years ago. You've been at Redeemer Lincoln Square for 8 years. Is that right?
That's right.
What caused you to stay in New York, other than being raised there and being a part of it? Yeah, what caused you to stay in New York and then stay a part of Redeemer as well?
I like it being difficult on myself. No, actually, I was in Boston for a while, for 5 years. I worked for a couple summers in London with a Bengali Muslim population. I've been in different cultures. I think if you're a minister, you have to decide: do you want to minister around people who are a missionary?
Right.
Goes often to places different from where they're from, and although you need to be missional wherever you're at, I think a lot of times you tend to be able to minister to the people that you grew up around because you understand their culture, the stories that are around you. And because I grew up in Manhattan, New York City, went to New York City public school, went away for uni, and then came back. I think the decision for me was, is this a place that, because I've been here, grew up here, might be able to be here? I think my father actually, one of the things that he said is that for a lot of people, New York City is very hard to live in because of its pace, its how expensive it is, just relationships. That his argument was, if you could live here, you should live here because so few people can long term. There's a lot of churn. There's a lot of transiency. So, I think there's all kind of factors that led to come back. I wasn't always here. We left, came back. Sometimes it doesn't matter if people make assumptions and says, well, you're this there because of your father, or you have to make the decisions based on where you feel like God's going to use you.
Yeah.
And was able to do that.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, the reason I ask is because I have friends in New York, and very similar to what you said, it is a very hard place to live for a number of different reasons. But for some reason, people also are drawn there and love it, getting caught up in the mix of what the culture is like. But to stay there, you have to, I suppose there has to be a love for it because there's so many different challenges of being there. So I was like, oh, you've obviously deliberately chosen to stay there. So you must enjoy it to some extent or another.
Enough. Yeah, no, my wife, I've been married for, yesterday was our 23rd anniversary.
Congratulations.
And she loves it, and that's a big deal. I could probably live other places, but this is where we're called to for now. I have 2 kids, 14 and 12, been raising them here. They go to a secular private school. So, yeah, we enjoy it. There's always pros and cons wherever you live, right? If I lived out in the more rural places, there'd be great things about it and really hard challenges, and same here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you've even just in that little intro, you've clearly done thinking around culture, and I know you've written a book, and it's in the process of just being finalized on cultural narratives. So I'd love to see what that's about. But before I do, I know the people listening would love to hear obviously being a pastor's kid, but not just a pastor's kid of, someone who's profoundly shaped Christian theology and thinking. So my question for you around that is, what's something that your father, Tim Keller, taught you or encouraged you as a child that has had a profound or meaningful impact on your life?
As a child, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't become a Christian until actually university. So, actually, but I think that should be encouraging for people, because I get individuals at times will say, "Oh, wow, Tim Keller, Kathy Keller raised you. What's that like?" And I said, "Well, I probably had one of the better distillations and presentations of what the gospel is.
Yeah.
But you're not saved by a good distillation and presentation of the gospel. You're saved by the gospel." So it wasn't until college, I think, when you grew up in a minister's home, for those either who are ministry kids, pastors' kids, I think there's a lot of times there's a hard place to know where your faith ends, or sorry, where your parents' faith ends and yours begins. So differentiation of knowing, is this mine, or is this something that just I was born into? What's that like? So for me, I needed to go to university, kind of have the mental and physical differentiation space before I had to say, well, is this really true? And kind of work through that process. And there was definitely a lot of, I became a religions major, studied Mahayana Buddhism and Taoism, just sort of a lot of the more Eastern religions, dabbled in them even. And then it was only kind of coming full circle, going, oh, there's something different here about Christianity that maybe it was as a child. Things clicked in university because I was able to sort of evaluate the different religious philosophies, and just to be very, in some ways, summative here, all religions generally have the same ethics, more or less. Don't murder, don't kill. A lot of them all say the same things. The way that you get to being in these different religions, almost all of them have some level of system of what you need to achieve. When it comes to Islam, when it comes to Judaism, when it comes to, escaping the wheel of samsara in Buddhism, you're trying to get away from suffering. How do you actually do that? Christianity was unique in the sense of, there's things that you need to do, but you never do them. You need somebody who will do them for you. And there is a real big difference between Christianity and other religions in that sense. So probably having that paradigm allowed me to come back. So I'm thankful for my family that did that for me.
Yeah. And it sounds like there was space that was created for you to come to that understanding yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, they were, they were pretty good about that. They one of the things my parents did do well is they forgave and repented in front of me. I try to encourage people to say, you might not know the best way to articulate a faith to your kids. A lot of folks that are millennials now that are having kids, they're like, how do I actually do this? And I said, well, do you forgive and repent in front of them? My parents actually, because the gospel was the job, they didn't feel the need. It was always around me, so it wasn't so much something that I had to perform. So seeing it demonstrated actually was also probably really helpful. In my evaluation process as an adult, I was like, wait a second. This is a dog-eat-dog world. What's this over here where somebody actually admits and confesses and says, I'm sorry, will you please forgive me? And somebody says, okay, I forgive you. You're right, I'll let you off. Those are not natural things that happen in culture. I just don't. People don't really. They'll tolerate you, but to actually say, you're back in relationship with me, even though you failed, even though you had that hard time, even though you didn't do well here. My parents did do that, and they emulated that for me, and it was probably helpful in that process of for my own working through my own faith or lack thereof.
Right. And then just finally, what was that? So you came to faith when you're in university. What was that like moment, if there was a moment, or that sort of like your eyes were opened, your heart was opened? Was there something like that for you that you remember?
Yeah, more. Yeah, there's like Peter conversions and Paul conversions, right? There's
Right.
the Paul conversions, like the road to Damascus. Peter's like, well, where did it actually happen? Was it here? Was it the with the food? With the
Yeah.
when it? Mine was a little bit more Pauline in the sense that there was this moment I was in my dorm room. It was, you know, I had been meeting up with an RUF minister. He kind of convinced me. He goes, "Listen, you're a New Yorker. You say you're honest." He actually used my values of my culture, which is, hey, New Yorkers are supposed to be honest and transparent and stuff. But you say you believe this, but then the way you're acting is this way. So why don't you actually come in line with how you're acting? You're kind of doing some crazy stuff on the weekends and doing this. So are you a Christian or are you not a Christian? You say you are, but then you're not acting that way. And I said, well, I guess I'm not a Christian. And I'm going to own that because I'm a New Yorker. I said, and the guy was like, okay, great. So what's it mean now that you're not a Christian? And I was like, well, I don't know, just eat, drink, and be merry. He's like, okay, how's that going for you? This is over months.
Yeah.
And then having sort of that existential crisis after looking over at different religions. And the moment was when the stories in the Bible stopped being, be like David, be like Moses, be like Abraham. And the story started becoming like, look how messed up David was. He was king and he still failed. Look at Moses who still doubted. Look at Abraham who's lying. Look at all these people and say, and God was still gracious to them and still moved through them. And if it was all that was for the Old Testament, here sort of fathers of the faith, and it was credited to them as righteousness through the person of Jesus, then it could be the same for you. And it was this great moment. I called my parents because I was 19 or something like that, and my mom picked up and I said, hey, I want to tell you everything I've ever done. And my mom said, I don't want to hear that. And she handed the phone to my father, so I just started confessing things to my dad. And at the end, to me, it felt like a very long pause, like 30 seconds, maybe a minute. And then, because I don't think he was searching for something to say positively, so he goes, well, at least you didn't get anybody pregnant. It's like, which, because, he's supposed to say, it would, I don't know. And I was like, I didn't care because I just felt so free and willing to be able to make those kind of confessions. And then over the, I guess, next couple of years, nothing gave me as much joy than to tell other people about Jesus and ended up becoming a minister. So here I am in front of you, Caleb.
Yeah. Wow. What a journey. Thanks for sharing a bit into that. I love that. And I also love how, you're able to call your parents. I think that's something that every parent, I've got two daughters. They're very young, but I always have in the back of my mind, like, what will how do I raise them in a way where they know that they can come to me, with that, like any news, but they know that they can come to me. And I just love that that's what you did as well. So
Caleb, you actually kind of put your finger on it. Even though it was sort of my parents' faith, there was always a lot of trust that they're like, we're going to love you no matter what. And so even though I was doing crazy things, when I was able to finally own something for myself, and not because I was trying to please them or do something like that, it made it really easy to come back to them. So you're right. I think that's what we want as parents now, because I have two daughters too, is saying I want them to be able to one day, no matter what, they can say, Dad, here's who I am. And even if they do things that are foolish and dumb and we wish they didn't, we still want to be able to love them and say, you're still here. I'm still here for you.
Yeah, brilliant. Girl dad all the way. If you have any tips, you're a lot further in the journey than I am, but send them my way.
Good luck.
Thank you. To you as well. So cultural narratives, why is this something important to think about? Maybe that's a good place to start. And then why have you, what have you chosen to write about to try and condense something that's so broad? Yeah.
Well, the book is it's coming out next year. It's actually a co-written book between me and my father. We started writing it before he died, and he mapped out what cultural narratives we should talk about, and I'll get to that in a second. He mapped out the chapters, the organization of each chapter, which is essentially something to affirm in each one of these stories, something to critique, and then something to redirect. This is using Dan Strange's sort of subversive fulfillment paradigm, where Jesus, Christianity, enters every cultural story and completes it better than it can on its own. And the concept of these stories goes like this, is that we as humans are less rational than we think. We're actually more story-based individuals. And every culture has to answer a set of questions for its people. Basically, who are you? What's wrong with the world? What will put it right? What's not going to put it right? And the like. And most people don't sit around during their days and contemplate those big questions. Some people, philosophers, big thinkers, but most people, just your average Joe, that doesn't do that. But they don't have to, because the culture has already given them the answers that they need, based off of the stories that move our imaginations. So for us in America, stories like freedom, you do you, just don't harm anybody else, is a cultural story that really moves the imagination. It's in a lot of movies and advertisements, Nike, just do it, things of that nature. Or identity is, look on the inside, find out who you really are, and then make other people outside align with that identity of who you are. So these stories, my dad came up with like 7 main cultural stories of, you have to be true to yourself, or you need to be free, and then just don't harm anybody. The happiness story is, in the end, you need to be happy and don't let anybody get in the way. The power story, which is, at the end of the day, everything is about power, and you need to disempower the powerful and empower the powerless. The morality story is fun. That one is, truth is relative, morality is relative, but we're going to cancel you if you don't do it our way. Which is you're laughing because I don't know I guess it's in Australia too. There's this I would love to hear what stories are over there as well. The history or progress story, which is, be on the right side of history. Everything's going towards liberation and freedom, and so it's called the progress story. There's the science story. Science can tell us how to live our lives, so we don't need religion. And all these stories have elements of truth in them, but they also are inherently flawed in and of themselves. And so the book is really trying to go through all those things.
Right. So what has been something that's like particularly impacted you as you've written and compiled it?
Well, the way I start the book off actually is actually the night my dad died. He one of the last kind of cognizant things that he did with me is we'd stay up all night. I think he was in a lot of pain, and he'd say, "Mike, let's pray the Lord's Prayer. Let's say the Apostles' Creed. Read me some Psalms." I'm trying not to get emotional, but writing the book made me realize he wasn't asking to do those things because, just to pass the time. I think there's actually stories inside of our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. There's a story there. Our Father, what does that mean? And as he was having them being recited, he was actually living and embodying them, which he had been doing his whole life. But at the end of his life, I think he wanted to go there. Which was very moving and very revealing to me, of going, oh, this is why discipleship, this is why worship, this is why the things that we do are not just going through the motions. These are, what we're doing in those moments is we're putting ourselves in stories that move us, because we're saying, I want my imagination to be moved by those stories, not these stories. And that was very moving for me to have that realization as I was oh my goodness, this is everything.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful to see a story and then to actually enter into it as well. I think it takes on a whole new meaning and understanding in terms of you're not just trying to intellectually ascend to something, but trying to see how it impacts, how it moves you, especially when it comes to things like the creeds or the Lord's Prayer, like those. Yeah, I think that's beautiful.
Well, Caleb, have you ever I'm going to ask you a question. Have you had anybody, somebody die around you, and then like friends who are not from the Christian faith try to kind of comfort you? Because that's what happened to me is after my dad died, I had people in my building, people growing up in New York City, I have a lot of friends from middle school and whatnot, and they'd give me a call, they would text me and say, hey, I'm sorry for your loss, but then their next phrase was always, he's in a better place, or he'll always be with you, he's always around you. And it made me realize that those were actually cultural stories that they were trying to say, but they weren't that comforting, because I'm like, well, how do you know he's always going to be with me? And how do you know, are these stories really working? Are they really helping? And I think that was part of the book, was trying to working through that. But Caleb, have you ever had those kind of experiences around you? And like, what how's it feel for you?
Yeah, I have. I've had a friend of mine pass away unexpectedly. He's actually a housemate of mine, and yeah, very, very similar. I think when you're trying to wrestle with loss and death and suffering, the element of truth is like what people find difficult is it is so unnatural, in the sense of we all die. We all know we're going to die, yet we try and avoid it. That maybe it's the happiness story. It's like we try and avoid pain and suffering and fill our lives with happiness. But then when death happens, and in such an unexpected way, I think it throws you, because it's like there's something clearly wrong about it as well. It's like,
Right.
this isn't right. So the phrase is like, yeah, he's in a better place, come up very frequently. And I think the experience for me, I mean, I couldn't understand it, and I was just like, yeah, you're trying to be like, how could something like this happen? So I think you try and cling on to elements that you hope are true, right? So you really do hope that they're in a better place, especially if you don't have a belief, or you can see that, yeah, maybe that's something the other person believes in. People know that I was a Christian, so I think that is like the assumption, like, oh, heaven's a good place.
Well, Caleb, I think what you're pointing out is suffering, hardship, like your friend that died. That's where the sort of rubber meets the road for a lot of people, because I think that's the place where, from an apologetic point of view, it's like, well, what else is there? And then how do I know this is actually true? And what's real and what's not real? And I think that's really where a lot of people just struggle, because I think there's a lot of unknown what happens after, but how you think it ends does affect how you live your life now. Because if there is no rhyme or reason in the future, you have to, if you really take that at its essence, then that does affect, like, well, how do you have purpose and meaning now? If there is a rhyme and reason, then there is something. But then what version is there? Because there's suffering, right. Kind of, there's always, actually, in Dad's book, which I haven't actually fully read, the on suffering. No, it's walking with God through pain and suffering, I think is what it's called. I do remember reading the first couple of chapters, and he actually points out that there's only like 5 or 6 there's only like 5 or 6 possibilities for how to handle suffering. Have you thought about this, like, or seen this?
No, I've got the book, but I have not thought about it for a long while.
Caleb, no judgment. No, I'm going to butcher this, but basically, I think it's something along the lines of. I can
get the book if you want.
No. I think I have it off the top of my head. I think one version is basically naturalism, which basically says you come from nothing, you're going to go to nothing, but there has to be, but somehow there's something in between, which if you think about it, doesn't logically work. Anyway, there's the naturalistic view of suffering, which just says, well, this is just the way it is, and there's no rhyme or reason for why there's monsoons and hurricanes and earthquakes. It just happens. There's a sort of Buddhist or Eastern, which is that there's a suffering is because of desire. There's a wheel of samsara. You need to get rid of desire, and then you'll get rid of suffering. Islam, a lot of other religions basically say that, hey, there's a God, and God's in charge, and there's no way for you to get outside of his sort of power. If you're suffering, it's just because that God's in charge. The fourth version is karma. It's Hinduism. It's the idea that if you're suffering, it's because you've done something wrong, and you need to do right stuff. I think there's a fifth one that's more like it's very similar to the more Babylonian views. There's a good God and a bad God, and they're warring. And it's just sort of fate. There's like a fatism. And then the sixth answer is the Christian answer. And what I really, all the other possibilities of how suffering works has to fall into those possibilities. But if you think about it, the naturalistic one, it doesn't help very much, because just saying that this is just the way it is not very helpful. When you go to the Buddhist view, the problem with that one is it basically says that the way to get away from suffering is to say there is no suffering, because there is no you. It actually makes you less human in the sense of you have to, any kind of pain or suffering, you have to kind of say, it's because I'm desiring too much. I need to let go and detach, and that actually doesn't, I think, jive with the human experience a lot. The third version, which just says God's in charge, or fatism, you end up being sort of at the mercy of. There's nothing that you can do about it. It's very similar to the naturalistic view, just with God in charge. The Hindu view, which says you've done something wrong, the problem with that one is we know a lot of bad people have very good lives, and a lot of good people have really hard lives. So again, it doesn't hit our experience the most. And so the Christian view that basically comes out and says there is bad, there is evil, but there's one who enters into it and does something about it. I just think has a lot more resources. When you lost your friend, or when I lost my father, those are the only possibilities that you could go into. I just feel like the Christian one has more answers in that sense.
Yeah. So digging into that, what did that view do for you in your response to loss? So you say it had so much to offer. What did it offer you in that time of loss? And then on the other side of that as well, just thinking of all the conversations that you're having or people were giving to you, how did it inform how you would engage with others around you?
Well, and I want to hear again also when you said you had your friend die that was very close to you. Again, I think it puts when life's going great, when things are fine, it's just so easy to just coast through life. It's when you have that loss, you lose that father, you lose that friend, and then you're asking yourself, well, it says there's moments when you say to yourself, am I what I'm holding on to, is this really real, or is there something else out there that I'm missing? And so even as a minister, I had to ask myself, is this okay that my father died? Is that no, it's not okay. But it's because my faith says it's not. It doesn't have to be okay. So I think first, individually, I was wrestling myself with those six views that I showed you of what's the other possibility out here? Maybe this is just random. Maybe it's this. So I had to really wrestle with those things, because those each have different stories. Their religions are different stories too of how the world lives and interacts. So I had to wrestle with that. But then when I kind of realized that how much Christianity actually does equip us to not pretend like there's no such thing as suffering, that we're all part of the one soul, but not also just say, well, yeah, God's in charge and stinks to be you. Not that sounds really reductionistic, but sometimes that's how it feels like when religion treats suffering that way. Whereas Christianity says suffering's real, but God so cares about it, he enters it himself. He knows what loss is like too. He lost his son. He knows what it's like. So there's just so much. That still doesn't ultimately, I mean, at the end of the day, I still miss my father. But there's a different, how do I put this? There's a different spin on it than if I had to hold these other views. I mean, Caleb, what about you when you lost your friend?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Christianity definitely offers a different way of dealing with it. I think it holds the tension of, like, this is part of the human experience. It's a reality.
Yeah, it doesn't ignore it.
It doesn't ignore it, and it doesn't reduce it either. I mean, you look at the Psalms, and like 40% of Psalms are Psalms of lament. And I think there's something to say that, there's this element of holding pain and suffering in one hand, and then holding on to the hope that we have in God in the other. Not that they're separate, but it's like those two come together really in the image of Christ. And yeah, I don't know in terms of, I don't think I had the greatest response when my friend passed away. I think I really withdrew and went into questioning. But I think looking back, I was like, maybe that was the right response, because I don't think God expected me to be like, no, everything's going to be fine. I think he actually wanted me to go to him and take those questions to him.
No, that's the beauty of what I think our faith offers. Like, if you go to the Psalms, you have many Psalms questioning God. How long, O Lord? Literally, there's so many of those things. And there's some Psalms where, I think it's at least two, it's like Psalm 80 or 88, I think, where the psalmist talks about this pain and hurt, and then just ends. There's no like happy ending. The psalm itself doesn't say, and I find that very freeing, that we're allowed to even go with our hurt, and he's a big enough God to even handle that and lets us. I mean, I think the difference between that, what you just said, Caleb, of like your own questioning and doubts and stuff, Christianity even lets us have that space that to even go there and do that. We even have depictions of it through the Psalms. Whereas, again, I think the other possibilities out there just are a lot thinner when it comes to handling our grief. Because either in the naturalistic view, it's like we can't even grieve because there's no such thing as really pain. There's no such thing as suffering, because we're just a bunch of evolved ions and atoms and stuff. So I'm saying, so I just think when my friends were like, hey, don't worry, he's always there with you. I'm like, well, actually, from your view, you can't say that. Yeah. You're saying that, but you don't. How do you know that? Like we have a rootedness in, like, either the resurrection actually happened or it actually didn't. If it's just a platitude that makes us feel better, like a bedtime story, it means nothing. But if it actually happened, then I will see my Father again. Yeah. And that's very emotional, and yet it's a story that I put myself in that changes how I live my life.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think, it's something to love someone and then to be moved by that love. I think the grief is an appropriate response to it, because it shows that there's a gap that's been left. And grief is okay going forward, because the absence of what I miss is okay to kind of go back into. I don't have to pretend like I've talked to people who've said that, they've lost their fathers, like, hey, I've missed my father for 40 years, still the wound's still there. And I think holding on to those, realizing, oh,
I think the older you get, the reason why you get more okay with grief is because you have more loss over time, unless you hit loss at a very young age. But then I can actually hold on to that and realize that the loss is not necessarily, it's bad, but I like going back into it because it reminds me of what I miss and what I'm going to see again one day. You know?
And part of that is also compassion. So I think if you didn't have compassion, and the older you get, the more loss you experience.
That's right.
So you can either learn to cope with it, and your heart gets harder. I was having a conversation with a medical doctor the other day, and they deal with a lot of death. And they're saying, like, just delivering news of you've got terminal cancer, or like you're not going to part, like, to all different young, old. But the way he is talking, he is like, there's times where I'll weep with them as I deliver the news. And I asked him, like, how, like, being in that field and where you're around it so much, how does your heart not get hard? And he said part of it is compassion. It's like you enter into that story, like you said, you enter back into that space, and I think there's something precious to be said about that, because you don't want to lose that. I would say,
No, and I think that's why I think it's important to, no matter what you believe, even if you're a Christian, to compare the different stories out there, because some are better than others, and the story that lets us be the most compassionate, be able to hold on to grief, that lets us say, no, it's not okay that this happened, but it did, and ignore it. I think those are the better stories because they actually explain the human experience better. So the book, the goal is trying to talk about the different stories, but if they're incomplete, then what's a better story? And it's almost sort of, before you can get to the bigger questions of, do I believe in God or whatever, and whatnot, you almost need to kind of you need to come to acknowledge that the stories you might be living by are flawed. And I think if you're a Christian, you might be living stories, secular stories, and syncretically intermingling them into a Christian story. Like that, for instance, prosperity gospel basically says, well, God wants me to be happy, and that means if I just pray enough, he'll give me material wealth and whatnot. That's taking the happiness story that basically says, since there is no bigger truth, you got to get your happiness now in this world. It's intermingling that, and there's a good aspect of it in the sense that God does want you to be happy, but the happiness will be most found in relationship with Him, not necessarily with a nice newer car. So it's things like that.
Yeah. So how does a person then go about diagnosing their heart in terms of, like, what cultural stories am I sort of living out in my life? Is there a way that you find helpful to diagnose the heart?
Yeah, I think the reason why we were putting out this book is, what was convicting for me is, I think, because these are we grew up with these stories all around us, and these are the sort of stories we swim in, you can't but help realize, oh, maybe I've kind of absorbed more of that than I thought of a particular story. And I think Christians need to inoculate themselves and go, oh, I need to realize that I might have been living the story more than I should. But also realizing, this is where I think Christianity is so nuanced here. If Genesis 1 is true, that God made all things good, but then Genesis 3 is also true, that all things are fallen, then living in this sort of space where things are both good and fallen, including our stories, is helpful, because then it means that we don't have to be all, let's reject everything, go live on a farm just with only other Christians, and then we can escape all the problems of the world. No, because even that Christian farm life will be fallen. But let's also realize then you live in New York City and you have these stories around us that all of them are incomplete, and you need to kind of, I guess I'm trying to help my daughters see. Here, I'll give you a good example. I have 14, 12-year-olds. They roll their eyes at me now, but anytime we watch like a Disney movie and it basically says follow your heart, right? They all say, just look on the inside and be true to yourself and follow your heart. And I always kind of pause the movie and go, girls, what's it saying? And they'd be like, oh, Dad, it says follow your heart. I said, what's wrong with that? Well, sometimes your heart takes you to the wrong places. And so no. I said, oh, good. And they roll their eyes, but I know that the Disney story of follow your heart, which there's some good things about follow your heart. There's sometimes your heart's going the right way, but sometimes it's not. Mm-hmm. So it's those kind of, that's how we do it, at least in our house.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna use that. Because
Wait, you use what? In what way, Caleb?
No, use the pausing, being intentional about, like, I think as a parent, what you touched on is you're thinking and viewing things from what ideologies or ideas are being showcased here, and then also what narratives are trying to get through.
Yeah, we'll pause a commercial. Listen, I'll pause a commercial. There's like a beer ad or like a car ad, and there's like a girl dancing or something. I say, hey, what's it saying? And they'll be like, oh, Dad, it's saying that if I buy this car, I'll have girls, or drink this, and then this will make me, because it's a happiness narrative, right? So
yeah,
you're right. That's how we're trying to do things. It's not always perfect because they get annoyed, but yeah. I don't care if they're annoyed. They're inoculated.
That's it. Do you think there's been a shift, or I'm curious to hear your thoughts, especially in America, because America is a nation that undoubtedly influences the rest of the world culturally, and then now with like technology and globalization, it has even more of an impact. Do you think there's been a shift in terms of that cultural narrative of like happiness and wanting life to be perfect and pain-free and whatnot, to like a more fear-based, where I think a lot, maybe more recently, it's just seems like fear and causing anxiety is a way to market or sell things, or like is it tapping, or what out of those 7 things, maybe that's a question, what is that tapping into?
I think good question. There's a lot of things going on. I'll just, to keep it simple, I think the power narrative that basically says everything's about power at the end of the day, right. Which is a more Nietzschean, Foucaultian, 20th century continental philosophy that basically says, well, if there is no God, then there is no greater purpose and meaning. That means it's just my power versus your power. So forgiveness is not really real. It's just my way of pushing my power over you and getting me to still stay in power, as a white male. These are themes that are big in sort of America. And I think there's a cynicism. Yeah, there's money and happiness, but as you're getting more economic divergence and more sort of, again, part of this is also the internet, that you're seeing more of the brokenness and more of the fracturing that's going on, both politically and economically and racially in America, but probably worldwide. There's more and more of a belief that we're not going to be able to do this all together, right. And therefore it's my power versus your power. Now, power is real. The problem with the power narrative is the minute you say everything's about power, then even the statement everything's about power is about power. It eats itself. What do you mean by that? Well, it means that if you say everything's about power and it's just the powerful versus the powerless, then the statement that the powerful versus the powerless is a movement, you're only saying that out loud because you're trying to get your power over me. Why should I believe it? If everything's ultimately about power, then so's that statement, which means there's no way forward, and we shouldn't even listen to the statement that everything's about power. So I think the Christian answer is, if everything's ultimately about power and there's no way forward, then we're just going to intimately fracture. You can't hold that view on its own because it ends up eating itself, because it breaks the law of non-contradiction and ends up being a power statement itself. But the Christian answer to power is what Jesus does. Go to John chapter 13, I think it is 13, 14. There's this great verse where it says that it says that he realizes that all power, in the NIV it uses the word power, all things have been given to him. And as all things have come from him, from the Father, it says he gets up, takes off his tunic, and washes the disciples' feet. And it's this beautiful moment where Jesus doesn't ignore power, doesn't say it's not there, but he takes it and he uses it and he serves with it. And I think the Christian answer to power is, if everybody takes whatever power they have and serves others with it, that will change how we do it. But you're not wrong, Caleb. I think the American view, you said fear-based, but I think it's because it comes down to power in that sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was wondering that because it seems like there has been a shift in even like, I suppose the most obvious places. You look at politics and you try and demonize the other party.
That's right.
So it becomes less about what do we stand for and more about who do we stand against. And that makes sense with what you're saying. It's like it becomes a power battle, essentially.
Right.
How do we discredit someone so we can have more power?
Yeah.
Or that's the narrative that's going on. That's what they're trying to do to us.
And to be overly simplistic, if the happiness narrative was like, let's outsource globalism and sort of consumerism, which we've done as Americans, the power narrative is basically saying, yeah, okay, but we all know America first, right? We this is not working out for us, so let's do our thing for ourselves. It's all this, it's a dog eat dog world, so we're going to protect our own people, and that ends up being our power versus your power. And why should we try to help each other and care for each other? And yeah.
So maybe a sort of parallel thought to this is ministering in New York City. How have you found people's responsiveness to the gospel or apprehension towards it? What's the word on the street, or what's the feel at the moment?
Yeah. I want to hear your thoughts over on the other side of the pond in Australia. But briefly, it used to be a lot more intellectually rigorous, where people wanted to walk through a lot of the suffering. How can a good God let bad things happen? Right. Which is still probably the number one big question, because it's still a huge question for Christianity. Even though we talked about suffering briefly, it's still a huge deal. If God's in charge, why would he let it even happen in the first place? But related to that, the average under 45-year-old who goes to our church, the question isn't, is Christianity true? It's more, is it good?
Right.
And I think that which is a little different. It's not so much like, they're like, okay, I can believe it's true. They can get behind spirituality. They can get behind miracles and God, this idea of God. But how do I know he's good is sort of a bigger apologetic question people are asking these days. What about Australia?
Yeah, I mean, I can't talk for the whole of Australia, and I feel like where I'm at, Perth is so different to the East Coast as well. There's definitely been a resurgence in questioning, like not cynically questioning, but like curiously questioning what's Christianity about. Like maybe it is part of that. Like, is it good? So I think there's a more of an openness to that. What I found interesting is there seems to be more of an openness as well to like traditions. So people are wanting to find out about history and like, where does Christianity come from? Like, it makes these claims, and what's it actually rooted in? So it seems like there's a search for, where like historically people have believed in it. Why have they believed in it?
There's definitely because of AI and because of our online digital presence, I think there's a lot of people wanting to see like a historical rootedness, whether it's Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy or the benefit of being Presbyterian. We have a rooted tradition in Presbyterianism, but there's definitely a movement, and I think we have probably a good one, because I think people are really wondering, what's it mean to be human? What's it mean to be an embodied presence? So there's a lot. People might not use that term, but I think the relatedness and the physicality of our own nature is something that I think is going to become a bigger deal as we move along here.
Yeah, I was going to say Perth as well is an interesting place because this is not a brag by any means, but it is so like good to live here. So when you talk about happiness or the good life, it's like Perth on so many categories ticks all those boxes. You look at the climate's pretty mild. We get like really nice summers. We're by the beach. The beach is like pristine, world-class beaches. The city isn't like super busy. People are able to access the life they have. So I think a lot of the questions that people have aren't around like that pain or suffering thing. It's more like, well, like what is the goodness of God that like overcomes the goodness that we're experiencing here?
So you know what's funny is that I was in Hawaii with a friend of mine. This is years and years ago. I've never been to Australia, but when I was in Hawaii, it was paradise. It was beautiful, great climate, beaches. You said world-class beaches, and I said to my friend, this is so perfect. How do you minister here? How do you be a pastor here? And he had the best answer. His answer was, "Oh, it's actually really easy. We talk all the time about, look around. It's paradise. You're in the best place ever, and yet your life is still hard and you're still sad. So that's why you need Jesus still." You know, it's this all of a sudden aha that sometimes when everything is so great and yet your life is still not great, that's a great apologetic of saying maybe there needs to be something else.
Yeah,
I imagine Perth is something like that, right?
100%, exactly. Yeah, I think that sort of summarizes that like evangelism take over here pretty well, is that it is so good, but if you're still having that human experience, why is that? Yeah, exactly.
Well, which takes us back to where we began, which is we're all in the same boat in the sense of we're living life, whether it's New York or Perth. Suffering hits, sadness happens, your father dies, your friend dies. You know, just give it time and something bad will happen. And those are the moments when you have to say, well, what do I believe and why do I believe it? And there's only a couple, again, those first few chapters of that book that I have, Walking
I'll send
with
you a
God.
copy.
Thanks. I think I have it somewhere. But the first few chapters, I think there's something really, whether you're a Christian or not, to kind of weigh the different, only 5 or 6 possible ways that you can handle suffering, and ask yourself if what you're holding is actually the best explanation of your experience.
Yeah, that's I love that. Just aware of the time, I want to ask 2 more questions. One is the last question I'll ask is what I usually do with our guests is I'll ask our previous guest a question to give to our next guest. So I'll ask that in a second. But before I do, what parts of our culture do you see are just repetitions of history or are cautionary tales that we have not learned from?
Are you saying like what parts of our culture we're just sort of destined to repeat? Is that what you're saying? Yeah,
or that from your insight and your knowledge that you see that we're either destined to repeat because there's no thoughtfulness around changing it, or it's something that's a cycle that you can see through history that we haven't learned from.
Yeah, well, great question. What we tend to do is we tend to usually, all the ideologies that we're swimming in usually elevate something good and we make it sort of supreme and we idolize that, and we tend to take something that's not good and we tend to basically demonize it and say this is the main problem. In 1937, Ronald Niebuhr did he spoke to a bunch of He was a professor here in America. He spoke in Oxford right before World War II, talking about 4 ideologies. He called them Romanticism, Rationalism, Nationalism, and Socialism. And he pointed out that each one idolized something. Romanticism idolized the individual. Rationalism idolized science, technology. Nationalism idolized the nation. Socialism idolized the state and various sort of identity politics. And they also demonized each one of them. Each one of them demonized something that was wrong and that was bad. I think I just see the same. We're just doing the same thing again. That was right before World War II, of taking something good, idolizing it, and then taking something that's fallen and saying that's the real bad, when they all have part of the truth but not all of it. And we're destined to keep repeating it until we see that the main problem isn't, in nationalism, the problem is the outsider, it's the foreigner. And the idolization is that's who we demonize. We idolize home, this land, soil, our space. Which is a good thing. It's good to have our culture and nation and stuff, but it idolizes something, demonizes something. Until we realize the real problem is sin, it's taking something and making it too important to us than God. And until we realize that that's the real problem, we're going to just keep falling into this pattern where we're going to identify something else as the problem and weaponize it against each other. So I feel like that's sort of the pattern we're in. But hopefully that's where Christianity can really still speak into people's lives and say, hey, there's these are aspects of truth, but they don't have the full gamut of it. Christianity kind of takes your human experience and gives a better explanation for what's really going on.
Yeah. What would be your encouragement for churches and pastors and ministers amidst wrestling with those things? How should they engage with it, or how should they be faithful in? A
lot of ministers are hard up because they're like, I'm not a cultural apologist. You can't read it all. I'm just trying to be faithful to my people. I think the answer is you need to find out whether it's Perth or New York City, you got to find out what your people are idolizing probably and holding on to. In New York, it's time and money are sort of the main cultural features. And time is money, but it's basically if I just had more time, if I just had more money, if I just had more a clout or acclaim, and that's what we idolize, and we demonize laziness and people who are not as fast as us and not as able to move. And I think whoever you are as a minister or the church, you just need to realize that your people are idolizing something. You need to speak against that and show them how the real solution and warmth and love and joy and wonder is found in Jesus, who brings that rest, who brings that answer that you always needed. Just basically grace and gospel, but you need to make it beautiful to them. It's not just good enough to say grace. You're going to say, well, how is it grace and how does it function? So, Redeemer's been known to say grace changes everything, but it changes you if it's put in a way that you can understand it and it moves you. So I would say stick there, stay there.
Yeah, thanks. I actually am really thankful for that, because I think you need to do the hard work of understanding the culture that you're swimming in so that you can actually see how grace applies to it. So, question from my previous guest. He asks, what fiction book have you read that taught you something about God or the Christian faith? It doesn't have to be theological fiction, but what fiction book have you read that's taught you something about God or his ways with the world?
I mean, the Kellers are always reading Lord of the Rings, Narnia, and Harry Potter. Basically, we're on some sort of repeat cycle, and every time I reread those books, there's always something new I see about Jesus. I mean, recently I've been reading Tolkien again, and I had this realization that Galadriel, when Frodo offers the ring and she decides not to take it, and I had this realization that she was actually doing something beautiful by saying, I'm going to stay Galadriel. I'm going to go away into the West. There was this embodiment of saying, I don't have to be more than what I am. I'm okay with how I've been made and what my role has been. I don't need to take that, because if I did, I could do great good, but it also twist me and destroy me. And so I'm going to let myself be just Galadriel. And there was this great moment of like, oh, work and rest, and I'm okay being Michael Keller. I'm good at being that person. I don't need to be more than who that person is and who God has made him to be. And I'm good with that. And it was that's the recent piece of fiction that moves me. But basically that's all we do is, as Kellers, we just read those three series.
That's great. I love it. Was that inspired by your dad, or is that just something that your family?
It's not just my father; it's my mother. It's just our family. Yeah. We read those 3 series, and we're Kellers. We're very loyal, or is one word. Another word is we just like the same things over and over and over again.
You chew on it, get all the goodness out. I love that. Yeah. Well, Michael, thanks so much for your time.
Do I get to have a question for the next person?
Yeah, I'm so I would have messed that thing up. Thank you for stopping me. And I almost stole that moment from you. I almost took that ring away from you.
Come on, man. This question I would love to ask the next person would be, what between freedom, happiness, power, if freedom is, I gotta make it simple so the person understands. What cultural story moves you or moves the people around you, and I don't want to make it too hard for them. You
can make it as hard as you like, or as easy as you like. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel bad now, because that was the question I got was nice. I love that one. That was a great one. They made it really easy on me.
But
no, all right. I'll do a different one. What are the stories around with the people that you have around you that need Jesus? Like how would Jesus apply to the people around whoever you're going to interview next? That would be my question to them, is what would be the stories around them that their people hold, and how does Jesus meet them in those stories?
Great. Yeah, beautiful question. And if you were to ask your hard question about between freedom, power, and happiness, what would that be? How would the culture, or what of those cultural stories move you? And what would
you could give them that one if you want. I was feeling bad, so I backtracked on that one. But those are hard, because those people might not know, have been thinking in those categories. So I feel like that's a little bit unfair to them.
Yeah. Well, I feel like my next guest potentially may have. That's why I'm like, I think that may actually be. I think both of those questions they'd like. I don't always know who my next guest is going to be, but I think potentially if it lines up, they've done a lot of thinking around their culture.
Great.
So I don't think it'll stump them. I think it'll actually bring life to them.
Caleb, it was great talking to you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for your time, Michael, and just your openness, your authenticity, and just sharing your heart and your love for Jesus in what you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.